I'm normally the first Sunday of the month, but because I was up in Massachusetts last weekend for the celebration of the Insight Meditation Society's 50th anniversary. It was a very kind of significant moment. Those who haven't been to IMS, IMS is kind of, I call it one of the two motherships of insight meditation in North America, at least. You know, they've other centers in Europe, but IMS was founded by folks that we've probably all of you have heard of: Joseph Goldstein, Sharon Salzberg, Jack Kornfield, who were whippersnappers 50 years ago. They were like in their, Sharon was in her, I think, late 20s. Jack and Joseph were 30. They'd come back from years spent meditating in Asia. You know, Jack was a monk. Joseph and Sharon were lay, but they had very deep experiences there, you know, and out of the Buddhist tradition that had been around for 2,500 years. And they went back to the United States. So there's lots of sharing about how, you know, they weren't the greatest of organizers. You know, they had skills as teachers even as a young age, but weren't organizers. But the truth is that they, you know, their hearts were so good and their intentions were so good that people who were more adept at organizing, you know, came in and joined. And you know, there's the center there in Barrie, Massachusetts, in central Massachusetts, has been there for 50 years and has been holding retreats, you know, continuously since 1976, and including a 3-month retreat every year, which, you know, folks sit for, you know, sometimes for the whole 3 months, sometimes for half of it, so a portion of it. One just anecdote before we get started today, which I found amusing, was Sharon Salzberg shared a story from Jack Kornfield. Jack was only able to be there for a little section at the end online, but Jack was a monk in Thailand, and I think maybe other countries as well, for a few years and his main teacher was Ajahn Chah, who I often quote and other teachers quote, because he's been prolific in many, probably hundreds, scores of monasteries have been set up from Ajahn Chah's forest meditation tradition. And when Jack was, you know, disrobing, you know, moving out of the monastic role back into lay life and coming back to the States, Ajahn Chah invited him, said, you should start teaching, sharing these teachings in the West. And Jack, you know, was saying, yeah, I'd be happy to do that. But he was nervous about it, you know, and it was kind of like, well, there's no tradition, well, not no tradition, but there hasn't been, you know, it hasn't been one of the main traditions in America, in the West, Buddhism. And how are people gonna take it up? How are people gonna respond to it? And he was kind of a bit nervous about it. And Ajahn Chah said, don't worry about it, just call it Christianity. So just call it Christianity. So I love this, you know, the name doesn't really matter. What matters are the teachings themselves. So I don't think Jack didn't call it Christianity, but he played a major role, as the others did, in really translating, not literally translating, but translating in a kind of broad sense, these ancient teachings from Asia, which had been in different countries of Asia going back 2,500 years, to the West, and putting the teachings in language that are, you know, that people can be receptive to. So I wanted to be up there just to kind of honor, you know, that 50 years of insight meditation in Barrie, Massachusetts. So what we'll do today, we'll have a beginning meditation, about 15 minutes or so, and then Emily will lead us in some mindful movement, and then we'll have a talk today on the Buddha's heart practices, particularly how supportive they can be in difficult times, kind of the times we're living in. I certainly find challenging, and I'm sure many of you do as well. Difficult times to be living through, and then we'll just hopefully have some time for sharing at the end, and that'll do it for today. So I invite you to just come into a posture that's comfortable and relaxed. So sitting with your back straight, so you can let your chest be open so you can breathe easily. Letting your hands rest wherever they're comfortable, in your lap or on your knees or on your thighs. If you like, you can let your eyes close and just let the attention drop down into the body. Just turning the attention inward, putting aside thoughts about the future, thoughts about the past, thoughts about things going on elsewhere, and just allow yourself as fully as possible to be here, to be present for your experience, for whatever you're experiencing right now. So you might notice just what the internal weather system feels like right now as we begin our time together. And see if you can meet whatever is here with kindness, with acceptance. And it can be helpful to take a few longer, deeper breaths to just help you arrive and settle. So a nice full deep in breath, filling the chest, filling the lungs, and releasing, letting go on the out breath. Long, slow out breath. Breathing in, calming the body. Breathing out, calming the mind. So let your breathing help you arrive and settle. Making space for whatever you're experiencing right now. See if you can meet it with kindness and acceptance. You might invite a smile or a half smile to your face as a way of gladdening the mind, is the way the Buddha put it, gladdening the mind, bringing some joy, some gladness into the mind and the heart. Maybe thinking about someone who You can feel warmth or friendliness towards, or somewhere that feels peaceful or calm to you. Whatever brings you joy right now. And just take in whatever you're feeling. You can feel some gladness, just invite it down into the heart area. Feel that joy there. Maybe reflect too on just some things in your life that you feel grateful for. Maybe loved ones, friends, wonders of nature. So much that we can appreciate, that we easily take for granted or easily get focused on, what's wrong or what should be different. And gratitude invites us to just to come back to appreciate all that we have, all that we've been given. Maybe including our religious or spiritual practices. And just letting your breath settle back into its natural rhythm. And the invitation is to meet whatever is present with friendliness, with kindness, with acceptance. The Sufi poet Rumi speaks of welcoming the guests, even if they're a crowd of sorrows who sweep your house empty of its furniture. Still treat each guest honorably. He may be clearing you out for some new delight. So this attitude of welcoming whatever you're experiencing, welcoming the guests. And if it's helpful, you might just let your attention rest on your breathing as a way of just stabilizing the attention, grounding your awareness in the experience of breathing in and breathing out. If it's helpful, you could focus in a particular area, maybe the nostrils as the air breath comes in and warmer breath is exhaled, or the chest and the belly expanding and contracting, rising and falling. Breathing in, knowing that you're breathing in. Breathing out, knowing that you're breathing out. Anytime you notice the mind has gone into thought, into planning or worrying or memories, daydreams, just gently and kindly bring the attention back to the body, back to the breath. And not to make thinking into a problem at all. Just seeing thought as just something the mind kind of habitually may go to. You know, maybe things in our life are creating worries or concerns, and the mind gets pulled there. And when we notice that, just kindly, gently coming back to the present, coming back to the body, the breath. Can this moment be a moment of peace, a moment of ease? Dorothy, the poet Dorothy Hunt says, peace is this moment without judgment, this moment in the heart space where everything that is welcome. Peace is this moment without judgment, this moment in the heart space where everything that is welcome. Just being able to begin again in any moment. It's coming back here, this moment, without judgment. This is a poem called Lost, we're finished with. Stand still. The trees ahead and the bushes beside you are not lost. Wherever you are is called here, and you must treat it as a powerful stranger, must ask permission to know it and be known. The forest breathes. Listen. It answers, I have made this place around you. If you leave it, you may come back again, saying here. No two trees are the same to raven. No two branches are the same to wren. If what a tree or a bush does is lost on you, you are surely lost. Stand still. The forest knows where you are. You must let it find you. Taking your time, coming back, opening your eyes, coming back into the group, and welcome anyone who joined us during the meditation. That was a poem called Lost by, it's an old Native American elder story rendered into modern English by David Waggoner. What I'd like to talk about today is a kind of frame what I'm going to be saying in terms of the times that we're living in, which I certainly find challenging. I'll just kind of make a few references to things without getting into a lot of detail. But maybe just beginning by inviting you to, if you'd like to share in the chat, how how you're doing, what you're noticing, what you're noticing right now, or if you want to share more broadly about, how it is for you in these times, in these days and weeks and months we're living through. Anything you want to share, about your emotions and mind states right now. Anything you'd like to share, please go ahead and do so. And anytime you might, if you feel inclined, you might just put something in the chat. Francesca, grateful and at peace with myself. Thanks. In this moment. Pam, feeling deeply uneasy and helpless about everything happening. Yeah, thank you. Anyone else feeling uneasy or helpless? Or me too, Pam, says Terry. Emily, gratitude for all the mothers and nurturers of my life. Yeah, happy Mother's Day to all the moms. Hoping to feel and share compassion. Yeah, thank you, Philip. Yeah. Yeah, I'll just share a little bit for Diane, harrowing times. iPhone, body feels fragile and cautious. Susan, I felt overwhelmed at times recently. This practice is so helpful to ground myself. Thank you all. Sasha, thank you. Sasha, how do I keep my heart open to include all, even those I'm so scared of? Thank you. Thank you. Forest, moment-to-moment awareness, Judy, feel helpless. Yeah, there's a lot there. I was thinking, think about these times. I mean, I find that they're very, very challenging times to live in, without getting into things that kind of pull us into this versus that, or into a lot of judgment. Just to kind of note a couple of things right now. This war, in Iran, which was supposed to be over very quickly and was a war of choice, is still going on, and it's having a great, a lot of human costs in terms of people being able to make ends meet and get to work and pay, the excessive extra 50% on the price of gas, etc. And I was just seeing some statistics going outside of the US to the world more generally, how an extra 30 million people, according to the estimates of the UN Development Program, UNDP, 30 million people will move into poverty, out of, being out of poverty and having a reasonable standard of living, and will fall into poverty because of the economic and social consequences of this war that's going on. And according to a World Bank estimate, if the war goes on and even another few weeks more, 45 million people will become food insecure. That is, they won't know where their next meals are coming from. And so these ripples are going out, just taking that as one example. And I don't know about you, but for me, this last week has been a tough one, particularly. I think some of us were feeling, in the perhaps recent months, there was a turning of the tide. There was kind of things where the arc was kind of moving a little bit back more in the democratic direction and direction of justice. But the Supreme Court decision around the racial gerrymandering, I think, or however they put it in legal language, it is having the effect of really disenfranchising, particularly African Americans. May have the right to vote, but the vote, doesn't really have very much meaning. I was reading just seeing the cover of the week, that compiles stories from all over, and is not an ideological magazine. It's more a compilation of things, but their headline on the front cover is "Demolishing Voting Rights. Has the Roberts Court pushed the country into a new Jim Crow era?" And that's kind of very much what I see as happening. Not that, Jim Crow, that segregation, particularly in the South, took decades to create in the late 19th century, so doesn't turn overnight, but it's a turn backwards, certainly in my view, and it's very painful. It's extremely painful. I think it's painful for anyone who has a sense of the country moving towards the arc of history moving towards justice. And I could think of 50 other examples, but I'm not going to get into, don't need to get into a lot of detail about it, but just really to acknowledge that this is, we don't have to think the same way or believe the same things, and I'm not, framing this as a political so much as just a challenging time to live in. And the question, that comes is how how can we meet these times with some sense of balance? And how do we keep our hearts open? And how do we not get into, separation, division, judgment, and a lot of painful emotions, anger, getting caught up in righteous anger, or getting caught up in fear. Where is this all going to go to? It's getting worse and worse, and the mind creates scenarios. So how do we respond without creating suffering for ourselves and potentially others? And how can the teachings support us? How can the teachings of the Dharma support us in these times? That's kind of a question that I feel is a very central one, feels central to me today, and in these times more generally. And I believe that the teachings can be extremely powerful. They can be a refuge for us. The practices of both of awareness, the mindfulness practices of recognizing what's present, because a lot of suffering that, we suffer often when we're not aware. We don't like something, but we don't bring it into awareness. We can't really heal anything until we bring it into awareness. We have to bring it into consciousness. As the great psychologist Carl Jung said, what is not brought to consciousness comes to us as fate. It gets acted out because we haven't looked at it, we haven't brought it into awareness. So bringing our fears, bringing our emotions, bringing our mind states into awareness and making space for them, and seeing their impermanence, and seeing that they're not solid, and seeing that they're not essentially who I am, but they're more like kind of weather system passing through, that can be extremely powerful. And as well as awareness, we often say that just as a bird needs two wings to fly, so our practice needs two wings. It needs the wing of awareness, of insight, of seeing clearly on one hand, but we also need the practices of the heart, the practices that connect us with others, that relate us to others, the relational practices. So we need the practices of loving kindness to keep our hearts open in these times, because we could be aware, but without an open heart, we could be caught up in suffering. We could. We need both. We need both mindfulness, but we also need loving kindness. We need the practices that connect us with others and connect us with all of life. And so, in these times, I think the practices of the heart practices of loving kindness, you may be familiar with these four, what are in the Pali language called the Brahma Viharas. Brahma meaning the realm of the gods, and Vihara meaning a house or a home. So these are the divine, they're sometimes called divine abodes. They're qualities that are qualities of heart that are beautiful states of mind to live in. And there's four of them. The first is loving kindness, which is kind of its friendliness, its kindness towards ourselves, towards others, ultimately towards all beings. And even broader than that, all beings and all experiences. It's really keeping our hearts open. So can we keep our heart open to those who are causing suffering? It may not be very easy, At times we see people causing harm. It's not easy to keep our heart open to them. But through training the mind, and these practices are a training of the heart and mind, we can cultivate, what I think Sharon Salzberg calls a heart as wide as the world. A heart where we include everybody in our wishes of well-being. And this is what the practice of loving kindness is about. It's about it's cultivating friendliness towards all beings, and we start by recognizing that it is a training. It's not easy just to say, if I asked you to think of a politician that you dislike most or you have most challenges with, and I'd say to you, just send loving kindness to this person. It might not be the easiest thing to do. It might be like a lot of resistance to it. So it's not, we typically start where it's easier. We train ourselves with kind of opening our hearts to those who loved ones, people who've been generous to us, and going out to people who are kind of more neutral. And then when we're able to include, more difficult people and the most challenging people in our lives. And, I often use the image of like going to the gym. It's like building a muscle. We build a muscle of loving kindness and compassion and the other qualities. I'll name them again in a minute. When you go to the gym, if you went for the first time or hadn't been for years, and you saw a 200-pound bar there, you probably wouldn't start with your practices with that 200-pound bar or 300-pound bar. If you wanted to build your muscles and get healthy and stronger, you'd start where it's easier, and then over time you'd build up to be able to lift ever greater weights. And it's the same way with this training of the heart in loving kindness. The loving kindness is the broadest expression of these 4 heart practices. The second quality is compassion, and that's where the same quality of an open heart meets suffering. So it's specifically kind of related to suffering. So we see somebody who's fallen down and tripped over on the street and is lying on the ground. I think the first thing we'd want to do is to help them. Can I help you? Can I help you up? Do you need some, can I call somebody? We're gonna. Compassion has 2 qualities. Has the quality of empathy. That's that kind of caring. The heart opens to the suffering of another. The second quality is the wish to alleviate the suffering. It's to do something about it. It has this active quality, compassion. Compassion has active quality of wanting to help, wanting to alleviate suffering. So that's the second quality. The third is called different terms, but one is appreciative joy or sympathetic joy. It's joy in the happiness of another. So this is the same open-heartedness, meeting somebody who's doing well, somebody who's got a new job or a promotion, or, has just got married or had a child, something we could, the heart goes out and wishes them well. So in the Pali word is mudita. It's a nice word, mudita, M-U-D-I-T-A. It's that care, it's that happiness in another's happiness. We don't focus it so much in our culture on that. We're kind of this more competitive and probably more familiar with Schadenfreude. Happiness in your enemy's pain, your enemy's book being remaindered, on the remaindered shelf. You're happy about that. This is not that. This is happiness in their happiness. And then the fourth quality. So metta is loving kindness. Karuna, K-A-R-U-N-A, is compassion. mudita is appreciative joy. And the fourth is equanimity. And I wanted to take some time today to just kind of highlight particularly mudita, particularly the fourth one, equanimity, which is called upekkha, Upekkha. Or it may, I'm not sure if there's two P's or two K's, but upekkha, meaning equanimity, meaning balance and steadiness. Because I think that this, particularly in these times, this cultivation of equanimity can be extremely valuable to us. But before talking about equanimity, I want to just highlight some of the some elements that all these four qualities have in mind. And I really think they are powerful medicine in these times, because these times we're living in incline us or push us, I think, a lot towards separation. When we see harm being done, it's easy to get reactive to that, to get judgmental, to get into blaming, to get into separation. And whenever we do that, we suffer. And so these heart practices are about really keeping our heart open. That doesn't mean we don't care about, or we don't do anything about the harm that's being caused. We do, but we do it from a place of more of open-heartedness, of non-separation, of non-blaming, of non-judging. You know, if you look at people, I don't want to get too specific because we can easily get into, into judgments and into separation, but we see people, in high places in government now doing things which seem quite cruel. I'm kind of been involved in the efforts to support our immigrant neighbors here, and it breaks my heart to see children taken from their parents and people grabbed off the street who've been here 30 years and never done anything wrong except they've crossed the border to be here, to get a better life for themselves and their families. When I see the cruelty of that, without these practices, it's very, very easy for me to get into a blaming and a judging, and these are bad people. But there are causes in Buddhist teachings. It's understood that for anything that people do, there are causes and conditions that lead to them acting in the ways that they do. And this is not to condone harmful behavior, but it's to recognize, to take a larger view, if you like. There's that expression you might have heard that hurt people, that the people who are themselves hurting, like people who've been abused as children are more likely to abuse. And it's extraordinarily painful and sad that that's kind of the reality, that but that's how what kind of behavior gets internalized, and it gets acted out in the world, and the cycles can go on and on unless we, unless, as I was saying earlier, unless we bring the experiences into the light, into the light of our own awareness, into the light of speaking about things that need to be spoken about and all of that. So so talking broadly about these heart practices, what's really important, I think, is they're not so much about what we're feeling at a particular time, but they're about intentionally inclining the mind towards particular states, towards particular ways of ways of being and ways of relating to ourselves and to others. If I was saying before, thinking about somebody who we think of as we see as causing harm. It might be quite difficult for us to include them in our loving kindness, to keep our heart open to them. But really to understand these practices as a training, as a kind of a training in committing ourselves to having an open heart. So it doesn't mean we're already there. I sometimes think of it as as like a North Star that we're moving towards, that's directing us, that's guiding us in a particular direction. So it's having the intention of keeping our hearts open in loving kindness, in compassion where there's suffering, in appreciative joy where there's happiness, and in balance, in kind of steadiness when in general, when we need to, when we confront, both joys and sorrows. And these qualities are, so they're really commitments that we make to keep our heart open. And I've found this in my own life and my own practice very powerful. However I might be feeling, whether I'm feeling loving or friendly or not, to have that commitment of my mind. I want to keep my heart open. I want to include everybody in loving kindness, in my loving kindness towards all beings, because people who who cause suffering are themselves suffering. And again, coming back to, it's not to condone harmful behavior, but it's to recognize the causes and conditions that give rise to any kinds of action. And that we're all awakening beings, even people who've done very, very harmful things. They still have the possibility of waking up, of seeing the harm that they've caused, and repenting. Repenting's not so much as, it's a more kind of Judeo-Christian word, but kind of having remorse for their actions and choosing a different direction to go in. So the invitation really is to kind of think about and reflect on these four qualities and how you might bring them into your life, and maybe, or if they may already be part of your life or your practice, but more deepen into the practices of these heart practices. They're qualities that are unconditional. They're not based on, I'll be kind to you if you give me something back. They don't depend in any way on how somebody responds. We send them out, our wishes out, in the same way as the sun or the rain comes down and shines on people, whether they've behaved well or behaved badly, on everybody. So in the same way, our wishes of kindness go out towards everybody without conditions. They're also said to be immeasurable. There's no end to the possibility of including more and more people, more and more situations in our loving kindness, in our compassion, in our joy, in our equanimity, and remembering it's a training, and we can train the mind. One way we do it is just wishes, phrases we use. May I be happy. May I be safe. May I be healthy. May I live with ease and with kindness. May you be happy. So it's kind of intentionally inclining the mind towards happiness, towards well-being. And I want to focus a little bit in this rest of the time on the fourth of the qualities. It's this quality of equanimity, a kind of equanimity, if you look at the origin of the English word equanimity, it's kind of comes from two Latin words meaning kind of equal mind, a balanced kind of mind. And it's really it's a quality of steadiness, of balance, of evenness of heart and mind. It's essentially meeting both joys and sorrows with an equal mind, to not hold on to the pleasant and push away the unpleasant. And it's really part of our, the mindfulness practice we do, for example, in meditation. What we're inviting is an attitude of openness to what's pleasant, what's unpleasant, and to welcome all of the guests, whatever's coming. Can I be with this now? An angry thought comes up. Can I be with this? Can I notice it without holding on to it or throwing fuel on the fire of the angry thought, leading to more angry thoughts? But just see the thought, okay, feeling that in my body, feeling that anger, but letting it come and go, seeing the impermanence of all of these experiences, all of these emotions, all of these mind states. It's really seeing meeting all of life's ups and downs with steadiness, with balance, to meet, as the Taoists say, that life's 10,000 joys and 10,000 sorrows, to meet them with an even mind. So I wonder, do you, just reflecting on your own, proclivities, do you, is this something that feels accessible to you, or do you feel like, I don't like the unpleasant things, and again, it's a training. Wherever we are on the path, we have the capacity to cultivate and deepen our capacity to keep our heart open. There's a nice thing, framing of it from Sharon Salzberg, who's the kind of very wrote a wonderful book on loving kindness 30 years ago that's as relevant now as it was then. She says, love and concern for all are not things some of us are born with and others are not. So it's not like some of us are more, able to, to cultivate loving kindness. She says, rather, they are the results of what we do with our minds. We can choose to transform our minds so they embody love, or we can allow them to develop habits and false concepts of separation. So we can choose what direction we go in. Do we want to keep our heart open? Or do we want to kind of be happy with, I'm right and they're wrong, this kind of sense of separation where, there's the good people and the bad people, and, and that we're clinging on to that. That is a path, that latter, the second of those, is a path to suffering, because we're separated, we're contracted, we experience it as painful. We may get some, a frisson of something, of righteousness, for example, of like, we're right, they're terrible, they're always doing these things. And that may have, give a certain good feeling, but it's not a path to happiness. The path to happiness is to include everyone, to really remember what Thich Nhat Hanh called our interbeing. We're fundamentally not separate from anybody. We're all part of life. And when we create that, cling to that sense of false separation, then we suffer. This is how the Buddha put it. He says, just as a rocky mountain is not moved by storms, so sights, sounds, tastes, smells, contacts, and ideas, so all of our five senses plus the mind, whether desirable or undesirable, will never stir one of steady nature whose mind is firm and free. So just like a mountain, when we cultivate equanimity, we cultivate this steadiness, we won't be moved by pleasant experiences to cling to those or to move away from the unpleasant ones. We can find balance between in the midst of the joys and the sorrows. One teacher, Shaila Catherine, says, equanimity describes a complete openness to experience without being lost in reactions of love and hate. So it's a complete openness, not being pulled, in a reaction to the pleasant and reaction to the unpleasant, holding on to the pleasant, pushing away the unpleasant. Gil Fronsdal, the beloved meditation teacher, says a simple definition of equanimity is the capacity to not be caught up with what happens to us. Not be caught up with what happens to us. So again, to what extent are we caught up in what happens to us, rather than seeing, oh, this happens, but this is part of life. Some things go better, some things don't go so well. Can I find peace in the midst of it? Bhikkhu Bodhi, one of the probably best known current translator of the Buddha's teachings from Pali, translates this equanimity as being in the middleness. Being in the middleness, being able to hold that balanced place between pain and pleasure and joys and sorrows. So it's the nature of life that we will all inevitably experience joys and sorrows and a range of other pleasant and unpleasant experiences. Our happiness and freedom depend not on getting more of the pleasant and less of the unpleasant, but on meeting the ups and downs with balance and without craving, without aversion, without delusion. And the Buddha put it this way in a discourse, which he called the 8 worldly winds. He said, the world spins around 8 worldly conditions or winds: pleasure and pain, gain and loss, success and failure, and praise and blame. So these pairs, pleasure and pain, we tend to like pleasure, we don't like pain. Gain and loss, we tend to like gain. If we have some money invested in the stock market and our stocks go up, we tend to be a little bit more happy. And if the stocks go down, then we tend to be a little bit more worried or, not so happy. Gain and loss, we like things to, to experience things that, are pleasant to us and, make life easier, and we don't like losses. We like to be successful. We don't like to fail. We like if people praise us more than if we get blamed for things. If somebody, you give a talk and somebody says, "Oh, that was really boring," or that was awful. You come, "Oh, don't like that. I mean, if somebody says, oh, you did a great job, you covered all that, whatever, you tell, oh, I like, but not to hold on to. So the point is, we might, it'd be fine to just kind of, somebody says something nice to you. We don't have to say, no, that's meaningless. Of course it isn't. But you can kind of take in the pleasant feeling, but not to cling to it. It's really about the clinging. It's about the clinging and the aversion. Are we caught up? Are we swept up in the clinging to the pleasant and pushing away the unpleasant? Because it's the clinging that causes the suffering. It's not to enjoy something that's pleasant, nice meal. Great to enjoy a nice meal. Enjoy, you win $1 billion in the lottery, enjoy it. But it's clinging to it. Probably hard to get $1 billion without the clinging starting. So it's probably best to give it away, most of it. So it's about the clinging. So can we hold these, can we hold what's going on in the world and in our own situation in a balanced way? And if we can, we're going to live with greater peace and greater well-being and greater freedom, more happiness, by being able to say this, things come and go. It can be very helpful to take a longer view. Like if we're caught up in how painful the situation, let's say the political situation is right now, it can be helpful to see that, things have been harder before. Whether you go back to, to slavery and Jim Crow and, the exclusion of, people from the, from the political process based on race or gender or, religion, nationality, whatever. We can get a kind of, by taking a longer view, we can find more balance. We can see, this things have been hard before, and things change. Things can change on a dime as well. Things moved in the last week with the 2 court decisions, at least in my view, in a very kind of negative direction. In Virginia and in the Supreme Court, racial gerrymandering case. And yet they can change. They can change again on a dime. Who envisioned, the fall of the Berlin Wall much before it happened, or, the free and fair elections in South Africa in 1994, or the defeat of Viktor Orban in in Hungary just a couple of months ago. Things change and the unexpected happen. And if we can find balance, steadiness within this, all the changes of life, then we can live with greater peace and well-being. I was mentioning there's a sutta of the Buddhas called the Loka Vipati Sutta. There's the discourse on the limitations of the world, and the Buddha taught that in the sutta, he taught that the untrained person, what he called the uninstructed worldling, just the ordinary person who hasn't been trained in the Dharma, the uninstructed worldling, when pleasant things happen, gets attached to the pleasant things. When painful things happen, pushes away the painful feelings. So whenever these 8 worldly winds come up, they get swept up in the pleasant and swept in the opposite direction by the unpleasant. They push away the unpleasant and they hold on to the pleasant. And he says, the well-instructed follower of the noble ones, that is, a dedicated practitioner of the Dharma, will also experience pain and pleasure, success and failure, gain and loss, praise and blame. Will experience the same thing, but will see them as impermanent. They're changing. They're unsatisfactory. They can't be clung to. Even the pleasant things can't be clung to. The things we dislike can't be pushed away forever. And they're not me or mine. So both the untrained person and the trained follower of the Dharma, they both experience these same things coming up, the praise and the blame and the success and the failure. But for the uninstructed one, the untrained one, they get pulled, swept around. They get blown by these worldly winds. So this is the teaching of the worldly winds. The wind blows this way and they go this way. Goes this way and they get that way. They're overly jubilant or clinging to pleasant, and then they get swept away by despair when something, quote, bad happens. Whereas the steady follower of the Dharma will experience the same things but not be affected in the same way, because they see the changing nature of all of this, that none of it can be clung to, none of it is I or mine. So we can find peace within the circumstances of life, whatever they are. So the invitation is to really cultivate this quality of equanimity. And we could finish with a short equanimity practice. There's a lot more I can say about it, but I'd like to leave a little bit of time for some sharing. But maybe we'll just finish with a short meditation. So it should be 3 or 4 minutes. If you'd want to close your eyes, let your attention come inward. Just breathing in. Breathing in, I calm my body. Breathing out, I calm my mind. Breathing in, I calm my body. Breathing out, I calm my mind. May I be balanced. May I be at peace. So just taking in that wish for steadiness, for balance, for peace. May I be balanced. May I be at peace. This is a longer reflection. May I learn to see the arising and passing of all things with equanimity and peace. May I learn to see the arising and passing of all things with equanimity and peace. And just breathing in, calming the body, breathing out, calming the mind. May I be balanced. May I be at peace. May I learn to see the arising of all things with equanimity and peace. And in the same way as you wished for yourself equanimity and balance and peace, you might bring to mind someone, maybe someone in your life, perhaps someone who could benefit from equanimity, more equanimity, or anyone that comes to mind, just wishing for them. May you be balanced. May you be at peace. May you learn to see the arising and passing of all things with equanimity and peace.